The afternoon sun filtered through the large windows of Reagan National Airport, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Special Agent Vanessa Washington moved with purposeful strides through the bustling terminal, her carry-on rolling smoothly behind her. After 15 years with the FBI, she had mastered the art of blending in while traveling, today wearing a simple navy blazer over dark jeans, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun. This was supposed to be a routine flight to New York for a classified briefing, something she'd done countless times before being appointed director of the Special Operations Division 3 months ago. The promotion had brought new responsibilities, longer hours and higher security clearances, but Vanessa approached it all with the same calm efficiency that had defined her career. She checked her watch, still 45 minutes before boarding. Perfect timing. The line at the premium check-in counter was mercifully short, and Vanessa took her place behind an elderly couple struggling with their boarding passes. She scrolled through encrypted messages on her secure phone, mentally preparing for tomorrow's briefing on domestic terrorism threats. "Next, please," called the airline attendant, a young woman with a bright smile. Vanessa stepped forward, placing her ID and boarding pass on the counter. "Good afternoon." "Good afternoon, ma'am."
Flying to New York today?
The attendant began typing into her computer. "That's right, just a day trip." Before the attendant could respond, a man in a pilot's uniform approached the counter. "Denise, we need to verify a few passengers for weight distribution. Mind if I help out here?" His voice carried the crisp authority of someone used to giving commands. "Of course." "Captain Taylor," the attendant replied, stepping aside. Captain Robert Taylor, a man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and deep-set eyes, glanced at Vanessa's documents with what seemed like casual interest at first. Then his expression changed, his eyes narrowing as he picked up her ID. "Is there a problem?" Vanessa asked, her tone professional but firm. The captain held her ID up to the light, turning it over in his hands. "This doesn't look right to me." His voice carried through the quiet check-in area, causing several nearby passengers to look over. Vanessa kept her expression neutral, though she felt a familiar tension building in her shoulders, a tension she'd experienced too many times in her life and career. "My identification is valid, Captain. Is there something specific you're concerned about?" The captain's face hardened. "These new IDs are supposed to have certain security features. I don't see them here." He turned to his colleague. "Denise, get security, would you? We need to verify this." "That won't be necessary," Vanessa said calmly. "My identification is government-issued and current. I'd be happy to speak with a manager if there's confusion." By now, several more passengers had stopped to watch the exchange. Vanessa was acutely aware of their stares, of the captain's dismissive gaze, of the young attendant's uncomfortable expression. This scene was one she knew all too well. Being questioned, doubted, asked to prove herself beyond what others were asked. "Look, ma'am," Captain Taylor said, his tone condescending. "We take security very seriously here. If you can't provide proper identification—" "My identification is proper," Vanessa interrupted, her voice level but firm. "And I'm on official government business," the captain scoffed. "Right, government business." He made no attempt to hide his disbelief. Everyone's got a story these days. A small crowd had gathered now. The elderly couple from earlier watched with concerned expressions. A businessman in an expensive suit frowned at his watch, clearly annoyed by the delay. "I need to speak with your supervisor," Vanessa stated clearly. "You need to step aside so we can help other passengers," Captain Taylor countered. He was still holding her ID, pinched between his fingers as if it might contaminate him. Vanessa took a deep breath. "I will not step aside. You are currently holding my valid government identification, and I would like it returned immediately." Something in her tone must have registered with the young attendant. "Captain, perhaps we should call a manager." "No need," he cut her off. "I know how to handle security issues." What happened next occurred so quickly that several witnesses later gave conflicting accounts. The captain reached into his pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a small lighter, later explained as part of his pipe-smoking kit. With a swift movement, he flicked it on and held the flame dangerously, close to the edge of Vanessa's ID. "Let's just see how real this is," he muttered. The plastic edge of the ID card began to curl and blacken. Gasps erupted from the onlookers. The young attendant called out, "Captain, stop!" A security guard who had been watching the escalating situation rushed forward, but not before the damage was done. The edge of Vanessa's federal identification was now singed and melted. Throughout this shocking display, Vanessa hadn't moved. 15 years of field training had taught her to maintain composure in the most volatile situations. Her eyes, however, never left the captain's face, memorizing every detail, every expression, every micro-movement. When the security guard reached them, the captain handed him the damaged ID. "This woman is attempting to board with fake identification. Please escort her to security." The guard, unsure of the situation, looked from the captain to Vanessa, hesitating. Vanessa straightened her shoulders. The terminal had grown oddly quiet around them, the bubble of confrontation drawing all attention. With deliberate slowness, she reached inside her blazer. "Sir," the security guard said quickly, his hand moving toward his belt. "Please keep your hands where I can see them." "I'm reaching for additional identification," Vanessa explained calmly, her movement slow and controlled. "I am a federal agent," the captain rolled his eyes dramatically. "Of course you are." From inside her jacket, Vanessa pulled out a leather credential case. She flipped it open with practiced ease, revealing a gold badge gleaming under the airport lights and an identification card that left no doubt about who she was. FBI Director, Special Operations, Division Vanessa Washington. The transformation in the captain's face was instantaneous. The smug confidence drained away, replaced by a pallor that made him look suddenly ill. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The security guard straightened immediately, recognizing the highest-level federal credentials. "Ma'am, I apologize for the confusion." The young attendant's eyes had gone wide. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. The onlookers who could see the badge began murmuring to those behind them, the words spreading quickly through the growing crowd. "FBI Director. He burned an FBI Director's ID." Vanessa kept her gaze steady on Captain Taylor, who seemed to have shrunk several inches in the last few moments. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for support against the counter. "Captain Taylor," Vanessa said, her voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear, "I believe you owe me a new identification card, and perhaps an explanation for why you felt it necessary to destroy federal government property." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet authority in her words seemed to fill the space around them, making the large terminal feel suddenly small. A senior airline representative, alerted by the commotion, hurried toward the scene. The crowd parted for him like water. "What's happening here?" the representative asked, looking between the ashen-faced pilot and Vanessa. Before anyone could respond, Vanessa extended her hand. "Richard Zhang, Airline Operations Director. We met last year during the security conference in Dallas." Recognition dawned on Zhang's face. "Director Washington." "Yes, of course." He glanced at the damaged ID card still in the security guard's hand, then at Captain Taylor. Understanding seemed to hit him like a physical blow. "Captain, my office. Now." As Captain Taylor was led away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, Vanessa turned to address the young attendant who looked close to tears. "Denise, is it?" Vanessa's tone softened. "I still need to make that flight to New York. Do you think you can help me with that?" The simple human moment broke the tension. The crowd began to disperse, though many cast backward glances at the woman who had maintained such dignity in the face of blatant disrespect. As Denise processed her boarding pass with shaking hands, Vanessa reflected on how many times she had faced similar situations throughout her career. The assumptions, the extra scrutiny, the burden of proving herself over and over again. Today was just one more example, though perhaps more dramatic than most. Her phone buzzed with a message from headquarters. The New York briefing was critical. National security didn't wait for airport incidents or damaged IDs. Tomorrow, she would have to make decisions that might affect thousands of lives. For now, though, she simply needed to board her plane. "You're all set, Director Washington," Denise said, handing over the boarding pass with a new respect in her eyes. "And I'm truly sorry about what happened." Vanessa nodded, accepting both the boarding pass and the apology with grace. "Thank you, Denise. It's not your fault." She picked up her carry-on. "I believe I still have time for a coffee before boarding." As she walked away toward the terminal's coffee shop, Vanessa knew this incident wouldn't end here. There would be reports to file, meetings with airline executives, perhaps even press inquiries. But for now, she would focus on her mission as she always had. Behind her, whispers followed. Did you see what happened? He burned her ID. FBI director. The look on his face when she showed her badge. Vanessa didn't look back. She'd learned long ago that the best response to prejudice wasn't anger, but excellence, and she had a job to do. Vanessa sipped her coffee slowly at the terminal cafe, watching passengers hurry past with their rolling suitcases and travel pillows. The bitter taste helped ground her after the confrontation at the check-in counter. She'd dealt with prejudice throughout her career, but rarely had it been so blatant, and never had. Someone actually damaged her federal identification. Her phone buzzed with a message from Deputy Director Chen. Briefing materials. Uploaded. Sensitive. Review before tomorrow. She sighed and put the phone away. The New York meeting couldn't wait, regardless of airport incidents. The coffee shop television was showing a news segment about increased security at international borders, and Vanessa found herself automatically assessing the accuracy of the report. Director Washington? She looked up to find Richard Zhang, the airline operations director, standing beside her table. His expression was a mixture of embarrassment and concern. May I join you for a moment? He asked, gesturing to the empty chair. Vanessa nodded. Of course. Zhang sat down, straightening his tie nervously. I want to personally apologize for the inexcusable behavior you experienced. Captain Taylor has been removed from today's flights pending a full investigation. I appreciate that, Vanessa said, keeping her tone professional. We're arranging for an alternate crew for your flight to New York, Zhang continued. There will be no delay in your departure time. Vanessa studied him for a moment. Zhang seemed genuinely distressed, his forehead creased with worry lines. Mr. Zhang, I've flown with your airline for years. This is the first time I've had an issue like this. And it should never have happened, he insisted. I assure you we're taking this extremely seriously. May I ask a question? When Zhang nodded, she continued. How long has Captain Taylor been with your airline? Zhang hesitated. Nearly 20 years. And has he had passenger complaints before? The slight shift in Zhang's eyes told her everything. There have been incidents, nothing this severe, but enough to establish a pattern, Vanessa stated rather than asked. Zhang looked down at the table. We're pulling his file now. Director Washington, I want you to know that discrimination has no place in our company. And yet it happened, she replied simply. Look, Mr. Zhang, I'm not interested in creating problems for your airline, but I am interested in making sure this doesn't happen to someone else who might not have an FBI badge to pull out. Absolutely, Zhang agreed quickly. We're already discussing additional training programs and review procedures. Vanessa's phone buzzed again. Another message from headquarters. I need to prepare for my meeting, Mr. Zhang. I appreciate your coming to speak with me directly. Of course. He stood and handed her a business card. Please contact me personally if there's anything you need. Your replacement ID is already being expedited through our security office. As Zhang walked away, Vanessa noticed several passengers at nearby tables quickly averting their eyes. Word had spread through the terminal about what had happened. She was used to being watched, it came with the badge, but this kind of attention was different. The airport intercom announced boarding for her flight to New York. Gathering her things, Vanessa made her way to the gate, aware of the whispers that followed her. At the gate desk, the attendant straightened nervously when she approached. Director Washington, the young man said, clearly having been briefed about the situation. We're ready to begin boarding. Would you like to board first? Thank you, but I'll wait my turn, Vanessa replied. As she stood in the boarding area, a woman in her 60s approached hesitantly. Excuse me, she said quietly. I saw what happened at the check-in counter. I just wanted to say, well, I'm sorry you had to experience that. Vanessa gave her a small smile. Thank you. My daughter is with the Baltimore Police Department, the woman continued. She tells me stories sometimes about what she faces. She shook her head. It shouldn't still be happening. No, it shouldn't, Vanessa agreed. But good people speaking up makes a difference. The woman nodded and returned to her seat, leaving Vanessa to her thoughts. When her boarding group was called, she filed in line with the other passengers, many of whom gave her respectful nods or curious glances. As she settled into her seat in the first-class cabin, Vanessa noticed the flight attendant's nervous smile. Can I get you anything before takeoff, Director? Water would be fine, thank you. The seat beside her remained empty until just before the cabin door closed. A man in a suit hurried aboard, slightly out of breath, and checked his ticket before sitting next to her. "Just made it," he said with a relieved smile, then did a double take as he recognized her. "Oh, you're the FBI director from the check-in counter." Vanessa nodded, already bracing herself for the conversation that would inevitably follow. "Thomas Patel," he said, offering his hand. "I'm an attorney with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division." This caught her attention. "Vanessa Washington," she replied, shaking his hand. "Special Operations Division." "I saw what happened," Patel said, lowering his voice. "Actually, I was about to intervene when you showed your credentials." "That was quite a moment." "Not my first," Vanessa said dryly. Patel's expression turned serious. "Unfortunately, I'm not surprised. We've been monitoring discrimination complaints in transportation sectors. There's been an uptick over the past year." The flight attendant brought Vanessa's water and Patel ordered coffee. As the safety demonstration began, they paused their conversation, but Vanessa's mind was working. The Civil Rights Division of the DOJ could be a valuable ally if she decided to push for systemic changes, rather than just addressing this single incident. Once they were airborne, Patel turned to her again. "If you don't mind my asking, what will you do about what happened?" Vanessa considered the question. "Professionally or personally?" "Both, I guess. Professionally, I'll file the necessary reports. The airline is already in damage control mode." She took a sip of water. "Personally, I'll do what I've always done. Use it as fuel." Patel nodded thoughtfully. "My office would be interested in your perspective, if you're willing to share it. We're preparing recommendations for new training protocols across transportation agencies." "I'll consider it," Vanessa replied. In truth, she'd been thinking about exactly this issue for years. The opportunity to influence policy might be worth the time investment. The flight attendant came by with drink service and their conversation shifted to other topics. Patel was heading to the same federal building in New York, though for different meetings. They discovered mutual acquaintances in Washington and similar views on recent changes to federal law enforcement policies. As the plane began its descent into New York, Patel handed her his card. "If you decide you want to contribute to our recommendations, please call me." "And Director Washington, what you did back there, maintaining your composure, when you had every right to lose." It that made an impression on everyone who saw it. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply refusing to let someone else's prejudice change who you are, Vanessa said. The landing was smooth, and as passengers began gathering their belongings, Vanessa received a text message from Richard Zhang. "Captain Taylor has been suspended pending investigation. His employment record shows 3 previous complaints of similar nature. Would appreciate discussing further steps when you return." She showed the message to Patel, who raised his eyebrows. 3 previous complaints? That suggests a serious oversight problem, or a serious looking the other way problem. Vanessa countered. "Either way," Patel said, "it seems you've started something important." As they deplaned, several passengers nodded respectfully to Vanessa. A flight attendant whispered, "I heard what happened. That captain has a reputation among the crew. Thank you for standing your ground." In the terminal, Vanessa and Patel parted ways with promises to connect in Washington. As she headed toward the exit to catch her arranged transportation, Vanessa reflected on the unexpected turns the day had taken. What began as a routine trip had become something much more significant. Her secure phone buzzed with another message from headquarters, a reminder about tomorrow's classified briefing. For now, she needed to refocus on the reason she'd come to New York. National security waited for no one, not even for FBI directors who'd just experienced textbook discrimination. But as she slid into the back seat of the government car waiting for her, Vanessa made a mental note to speak with her own team about transportation security protocols. Perhaps this incident, unpleasant as it was, could serve as a catalyst for meaningful change. After all, that had been the story of her entire career, turning obstacles into opportunities, barriers into breakthroughs. The car pulled away from the curb, heading toward the federal building where tomorrow's briefing would take place. Through the window, Vanessa watched the New York streets pass by, her mind already shifting gears to the work ahead while a part of her continued to process what had happened at Reagan National. One thing was certain. Captain Taylor had no idea what he'd started when he decided to burn her ID. and Vanessa Washington had never been one to leave a job unfinished. The federal building in downtown Manhattan loomed against the evening skyline, its windows glowing with fluorescent light as darkness settled over the city. Vanessa Washington stepped out of the government car, thanking the driver before making her way through security with practiced efficiency. Her temporary ID badge, hastily arranged after the airport incident, drew curious glances from the security personnel, but no one questioned the FBI's Special Operations Director. The elevator carried her to the 14th floor, where Deputy Director Chen waited in the hallway. "You're late," he noted, falling into step beside her. "That's not like you." "Had an interesting experience at Reagan National," Vanessa replied, keeping her voice low as they passed other federal employees. "I'll fill you in later." Chen raised an eyebrow but didn't press. After 15 years working together, they had developed a shorthand that required few words. "The briefing room is ready. We've got NSA, Homeland, and CIA waiting. They're not happy about the delay." "They'll survive," Vanessa said dryly. The briefing room fell silent as they entered. 6 people sat around a polished conference table, laptops open and faces expectant. Vanessa recognized most of them, the heads of various intelligence divisions, all brought together for this high-level security briefing. Director Washington, acknowledged a gray-haired woman from the CIA. "We were beginning to worry." "Thank you for your patience," Vanessa replied, setting her briefcase on the table and taking her position at the head of the room. "Shall we begin?" For the next 3 hours, Vanessa led the meeting with focused precision. They discussed emerging threats, coordinated response protocols, and intelligence gaps that needed addressing. Throughout it all, she maintained the calm authority that had become her trademark, guiding the conversation with a firm hand when tensions rose between agencies with competing priorities. It was nearly 10 o'clock when they finally wrapped up. "We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9. Vanessa announced, closing her laptop. "I expect updates on those 3 action items before then." As the others filed out, Chen lingered behind. "So what happened at the airport?" "You mentioned it was interesting, which usually means trouble." Vanessa sighed, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. "A pilot decided my ID looked suspicious. When I insisted it was valid, he burned it with a lighter." Chen's eyes widened. "He did what?" "You heard me. And then I showed him my FBI credentials and he nearly passed out." Vanessa gathered her papers into her briefcase. "The airline is falling over itself to make amends. The captain's been suspended pending investigation." Chen shook his head in disbelief. "Only you could have something like that happen and still run a 3-hour classified briefing afterward like nothing happened. It's not the first time I've faced prejudice. David, you know that." "Yeah, but burning a federal ID? That's a new low." Chen's expression darkened. "You're pressing charges, right?" Vanessa closed her briefcase with a snap. "I haven't decided yet. The DOJ Civil Rights Division is interested in using this as a case study for new training protocols. Might do more good that way than just punishing one bigoted pilot." They walked together to the elevator, both lost in thought until Chen broke the silence. "You know, when you first joined the Bureau, people said you wouldn't last a year." Vanessa smiled faintly. "I remember. And now look at you. Running special ops, leading interagency briefings, making airline pilots faint with your badge." He chuckled. "You've come a long way from that rookie agent in the Baltimore field office." "We both have," Vanessa reminded him as the elevator arrived. They parted ways in the lobby, Chen heading to his hotel a few blocks away, while Vanessa waited for her car service. The night air was cool against her face as she stepped outside, the city's endless symphony of horns and distant sirens providing a familiar backdrop. Her phone rang, an unknown number. Normally she would let it go to voicemail, but something prompted her to answer. "Director Washington speaking." "Director, this is Richard Zhang from the airline. I apologize for calling so late." Vanessa checked her watch. Nearly 10:30 p.m. "What can I do for you, Mr. Zhang?" "I wanted to update you personally. We've completed our preliminary review of Captain Taylor's employment history." Zhang's voice was tight with tension. "The situation is worse than we initially thought." Vanessa moved away from the building entrance for privacy. "Go on." "There have been 9 complaints over the past 5 years, not just the 3 I mentioned earlier. Most were buried in his file or classified as passenger misunderstandings." Zhang's disgust was evident even over the phone. Two of them involved similar accusations of ID verification issues with minority passengers. And yet he remained in his position, Vanessa observed, keeping her voice neutral despite the anger building inside her. Yes, I'm ashamed to say our oversight failed completely in this case. A pause. The board has been briefed. They're meeting tomorrow morning to discuss termination procedures. Vanessa watched a police car cruise slowly past, its lights casting blue shadows across the sidewalk. Mr. Zhang, I'm less interested in one man losing his job and more interested in making sure this doesn't happen again. What systemic changes are being considered? Zhang seemed relieved by the question. We're drafting a complete overhaul of our complaint review process. Anonymous reporting channels for crew members, mandatory review of all passenger complaints by diversity officers, enhanced training programs. Another pause. We'd value your input if you'd be willing to consult. I may take you up on that, Vanessa said, spotting her car approaching. For now, I expect a formal written report on both the incident and your planned changes. Of course. You'll have it by tomorrow afternoon. After ending the call, Vanessa settled into the back seat of the car, giving the driver the address of her hotel. As they navigated through Manhattan's late-night traffic, her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Patel, the DOJ attorney she'd met on the plane. Just heard about airline's internal review. 9 complaints. This could be the case we need to push for industry-wide reform. Coffee tomorrow before you head back to D.C.? Vanessa texted back a quick agreement, then leaned her head against the window, watching the city lights blur past. The day had been extraordinarily long, yet her mind remained alert, processing the implications of everything that had happened. The car pulled up to her hotel, a modest establishment that belied her senior position. Vanessa had never seen the need for luxury accommodations on work trips. A clean room and a good shower were all she required. At the front desk, the night manager looked up from his computer. Director Washington, we have a message for you. He handed over an envelope with the hotel's logo. Inside her room, Vanessa opened the envelope to find a handwritten note. Director Washington, I was on your flight from D.C. today. I witnessed what happened at Reagan National and wanted to thank you for your dignity in the face of such disrespect. My daughter is considering a career in law enforcement, and women like you show her what's possible. With gratitude, Patricia Hernandez, U.S. District Court. Vanessa read the note twice, then carefully placed it in her briefcase. These moments, these reminders that her journey mattered beyond her own experience, were what kept her going through the hardest days. She kicked off her shoes and called room service for a late dinner, then opened her laptop to review materials for tomorrow's continuation of the briefing. National security wouldn't wait, even if her mind kept returning to the incident at the airport. While waiting for her food, she opened a new document and began typing notes for potential reforms in transportation security screening protocols. If the airline and the DOJ were serious about using this incident as a catalyst for change, she intended to ensure that changes were meaningful. Her phone rang again. Deputy Director Chen. You're not still working, are you? He asked when she answered. Just wrapping up some thoughts, Vanessa replied, continuing to type one-handed. What's up? Just got word from the director. News of the airport incident has reached him. Vanessa stopped typing. How? Apparently someone posted a video online. It's starting to circulate. She closed her eyes briefly. Of course someone had recorded it. Everyone recorded everything these days. And he wants you to know you have the full support of the Bureau if you decide to pursue this officially. Chen paused. He also said, and I quote, "Tell Washington this is exactly why I promoted her." Grace under fire. A knock at the door announced her room service. I need to go, David. We'll talk tomorrow. After hanging up, Vanessa accepted her dinner from the server and sat at the small desk by the window, looking out at the glittering cityscape. The food remained untouched for several minutes as she contemplated how quickly life could change course. She had boarded a plane as an FBI director heading to a routine briefing. Now she found herself potentially at the center of a case that could reshape policies across the transportation industry. Her phone lit up with another message, a link to the video that was beginning to circulate online. Vanessa hesitated, then clicked it, watching the scene play out from a bystander's perspective. The footage was shaky but clear enough. The confrontation, the captain's dismissive attitude, the shocking moment when he held her ID to the flame, and finally, the reveal of her FBI credentials and his visible shock. The comments below the video were a mixture of outrage at the captain's behavior and admiration for her composure. One comment stood out. "This is what real leadership looks like. No drama, no shouting, just quiet strength." Vanessa closed the video and finally turned to her dinner, her mind made up. Tomorrow, after the briefing, she would meet with Patel from the DOJ and begin outlining a formal proposal for industry-wide training reforms. The incident would serve a purpose greater than one airline captain losing his job. As she ate, Vanessa mentally drafted the first lines of what would become her official statement. "What happened to me happens to countless Americans every day, only they don't have badges to protect them. It's time we addressed the systemic issues that allow such incidents to occur." Outside her window, New York continued its endless rhythm, unaware that in a modest hotel room 14 floors above the street, plans were being set in motion that would eventually change the way thousands of travelers were treated at airports across the country. And it had all started because one pilot couldn't believe a black woman's ID was real. Morning light streamed through the hotel curtains as Vanessa's alarm chimed at 6 a.m. She'd slept surprisingly well despite the previous day's events. Years in the FBI had taught her to compartmentalize, to set aside personal matters when duty called. Today would test that skill, with the classified briefing in the morning and meetings about the airport incident in the afternoon. She went through her morning routine with practiced efficiency, checking her secure email while the hotel room coffee brewed. 3 new messages about the airport video, which had apparently gained significant traction overnight. The Bureau's public affairs team was requesting guidance on how to respond to media inquiries. Not their circus, not their monkeys, Vanessa muttered to herself, setting the phone aside to finish getting ready. By 7:30, she was walking through the lobby when she noticed several hotel staff members whispering and glancing in her direction. The night manager from yesterday approached her with an uncertain smile. "Director Washington, I hope you had a restful night." "I did, thank you." He lowered his voice. "I just wanted to say, we all saw the video. What happened to you was unacceptable." Vanessa nodded, unsure how to respond to this unexpected show of support. "I appreciate that. If there's anything you need during your stay, please don't hesitate to ask." Outside, the morning air was crisp with early autumn freshness. Vanessa decided to walk the few blocks to the federal building, using the time to organize her thoughts. Her phone buzzed continuously with notifications, which she mostly ignored. Let the world spin its narratives. She had work to do. At 8:45, she arrived at the security checkpoint of the federal building. The guards, different from yesterday's shift, straightened noticeably when they saw her. "Good morning, Director Washington," said one, checking her temporary ID with particular care. "Everything looks in order." Had they always known her by name, or was this another ripple effect from the video? It was impossible to tell, and Vanessa didn't ask. The morning briefing went smoothly, with agency representatives better prepared and more collaborative than the previous day. By noon, they had finalized action plans for 3 emerging security threats and established new interagency protocols that Vanessa had been pushing for months. "Excellent work, everyone," she concluded, closing her laptop. "I'll expect your implementation timelines by Friday." As the others filed out, Deputy Director Chen approached with his phone in hand. "The video hit 2 million views this morning." Vanessa sighed. "I'm trying not to think about that right now." "Too late." The director called again. "He's getting pressure from the transportation secretary to address it." Chen leaned against the conference table. "This isn't just about one airline anymore. It's becoming a conversation about systemic issues in transportation security." "Good," Vanessa said firmly. "It should be." Chen studied her face. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one you had before you reorganized the entire counterterrorism unit. The one that means someone's world is about to get flipped upside down." He grinned. "I'd hate to be that airline right now." "It's not about punishing one airline," Vanessa corrected him. "It's about fixing a broken system." She checked her watch. "I'm meeting with Thomas Patel from DOJ Civil Rights in 20 minutes. Want to join us?" Chen shook his head. "Can't. Video conference with the field offices at 1. But keep me posted." The coffee shop where Vanessa had arranged to meet Patel was just around the corner from the federal building, a small, independent place that was popular with government employees despite its slightly shabby appearance. Vanessa arrived first, ordering a black coffee and finding a table in the back corner with a good view of both the entrance and the emergency exit, an old habit from her field agent days. Patel arrived 5 minutes later, carrying a leather portfolio and looking slightly harried. "Director Washington," he greeted her, setting down his things and ordering an espresso from the passing server. "Thank you for making time today." Of course. Once they were settled with their drinks, Patel opened his portfolio and pulled out several documents. "I've drafted some initial thoughts on how your experience could inform new training protocols. The department is very interested in your perspective." Vanessa took the papers, scanning them quickly. "You've been busy. The timing is critical. We've been trying to push for reforms in transportation security screening for years, but without a high-profile case to demonstrate the need." He spread his hands. "Your incident provides that case." "If I choose to pursue it," Vanessa pointed out. Patel looked surprised. "You're considering not pursuing it?" Vanessa sipped her coffee, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. "I'm considering what approach would create the most meaningful change. A public battle might generate headlines, but I'm more interested in results." "I understand," Patel nodded. "But the public attention is already there. The video—" "I know about the video," Vanessa interrupted. "What I don't know is whether the airline is genuinely committed to systemic changes or just damage control." As if on cue, her phone rang with Richard Zhang's number. "Speaking of which," she murmured, answering the call. "Director Washington." "Director, thank you for taking my call," Zhang said, his voice tight with stress. "I wanted to update you before our formal report is delivered. The board met this morning and has terminated Captain Taylor's employment, effective immediately." "I see. Additionally, 2 members of our management team who were responsible for reviewing previous complaints have been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." Zhang paused. "The board has also authorized me to establish a task force to completely overhaul our training and complaint procedures. We'd be honored if you would consider advising us." Vanessa caught Patel's eye, gesturing for him to listen. "Mr. Zhang, I'm currently meeting with Thomas Patel from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. He's working on industry-wide reform recommendations. Perhaps this is a conversation we should have together." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Of course. Whatever you think is best." After arranging a meeting for later that afternoon at the airline's New York offices, Vanessa ended the call and filled Patel in on the background conversation she'd been having with Zhang. Patel whistled low. "They're running scared." "With good reason," Vanessa replied. 9 buried complaints, at least 2 involving similar discrimination. They're facing potential federal action if they don't make genuine changes. "And you think they're serious about reform?" Vanessa considered the question. "I think Zhang is. Whether the entire organization will follow through remains to be seen." They spent the next hour discussing strategy, with Patel outlining the legal framework for new regulations and Vanessa providing insights from her years of security expertise. By the time they left for the airline's offices, they had a solid framework for what meaningful reform would look like. The airline's New York headquarters occupied several floors of a sleek midtown skyscraper. In the lobby, a security guard recognized Vanessa immediately, another sign of how far the video had spread, and escorted them directly to the executive floor. Richard Zhang met them at the elevator, looking like he hadn't slept. "Director Washington, Mr. Patel, thank you for coming. The board members are waiting in the conference room." The mood in the conference room was tense. 8 people sat around a massive table, their expressions ranging from concerned to defensive. Shaw made a quick introductions: the airline's CEO, legal counsel, head of operations, and several board members. "Before we begin," said the CEO, a silver-haired man named William Porter, "I want to personally apologize for what you experienced, Director Washington. It was inexcusable and does not reflect our company's values." Vanessa nodded but didn't reply, taking a seat at the table with Patel beside her. She had heard too many corporate apologies in her career to be moved by words alone. Actions would tell the real story. "We've prepared a formal response to the incident," continued Porter, sliding folders across the table, "including Captain Taylor's termination, management changes, and our proposed reforms." Vanessa left the folder closed in front of her. "Mr. Porter, before we review your proposals, I'd like to understand something. How did an employee with 9 discrimination complaints remain in a customer fac position for years without intervention? The question landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of discomfort around the table. Porter looked to his legal counsel, who cleared her throat nervously. Our review process had significant flaws, the lawyer admitted. Complaints were categorized by type, and customer service issues weren't flagged for executive review unless they reached double digits. And who determined what qualified as a customer service issue versus discrimination? Patel asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Another uncomfortable silence. The employee's direct supervisor, Zhang finally answered, his expression grim. In Captain Taylor's case, that was our former head of flight operations who retired last year. Convenient, Vanessa observed. Director Washington, Porter said, leaning forward. We know we failed. That's why we're committed to complete transparency and comprehensive reform. Whatever it takes to make this right, not just with you, but for all our passengers and employees. For the next 2 hours, they dissected the airline's current procedures and proposed changes. Vanessa and Patel pushed hard on every point, demanding specifics where the airline offered generalities, insisting on accountability measures where they suggested self-monitoring. By late afternoon, a framework had emerged that was far more robust than the airline's initial proposal. It included external audits, mandatory reporting to the DOJ for discrimination complaints, revised training for all customer-facing staff, and anonymous reporting channels for employees who witnessed problematic behavior. This won't be cheap to implement, Porter noted, reviewing the final list. Neither are discrimination lawsuits, Patel countered. As the meeting wound down, Zhang approached Vanessa privately. There's one more thing you should know, he said quietly. We've been contacted by 3 other passengers who experienced similar treatment from Captain Taylor, but never filed formal complaints. They came forward after seeing your video. Vanessa wasn't surprised. I hope you'll be contacting them. Already done. Zhang hesitated. Director Washington, this has been educational, to say the least. I know we can't undo what happened to you, but I want to thank you for pushing us to be better rather than just taking us down. The goal was never punishment, Mr. Zhang. It was progress. As Vanessa and Patel left the building, the setting sun cast long shadows between the skyscrapers. They walked in companionable silence for a block before Patel spoke. You know, we could use what happened today as a template for other airlines. Create a model program that could be implemented industry-wide. Vanessa nodded, her mind already moving in the same direction. Draft something up. I'll review it on the flight back to DC tomorrow. Speaking of which, Patel said with a hint of a smile, are you flying the same airline? As a matter of fact, I am. Vanessa checked her watch. I have a meeting with the Bureau's Public Affairs team in an hour to discuss an official statement. After that, I need to prepare for tomorrow's final briefing session. Patel shook his head in admiration. You make it look so easy, handling all of this at once. Vanessa gave him a sidelong glance. Nothing about this has been easy, Mr. Patel, but necessary things rarely are. They parted ways at the next corner, Patel heading to the subway while Vanessa walked back toward the federal building. Her phone had dozens of missed calls and messages, from colleagues, from journalists, from people she hadn't spoken to in years who had seen the video. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of turning this incident into meaningful change. For tonight, she still had a national security briefing to prepare for. One crisis at a time. That had always been her approach, and so far, it had never failed her. 3 weeks after the incident at Reagan National Airport, Vanessa Washington stood at a podium in the airline's corporate headquarters, looking out at a room full of journalists, industry representatives, and government officials. The spotlight wasn't a place she typically sought out. Her work with the FBI often required discretion rather than publicity. But today was different. Today was about turning a painful personal experience into positive change. Good morning, she began, her voice calm and measured. 3 weeks ago, I experienced something that thousands of Americans face every day, being treated with suspicion and disrespect based solely on appearance. She paused, making eye contact with various people in the audience. The difference was that I had a badge to protect me. Most people don't. In the front row, Richard Zhang nodded almost imperceptibly. Beside him sat William Porter, the airline's CEO, looking considerably more humble than he had during their first meeting. Thomas Patel from the DOJ Civil Rights Division stood at the side of the room, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Today, I'm not here to dwell on what happened, Vanessa continued. I'm here to announce a new initiative that will affect how travelers across this country are treated at airports, on planes, and throughout the transportation system. Behind her, a screen displayed the name of the program, Dignity in Transit, a national training initiative. It had taken 3 weeks of intense work, conference calls squeezed between security briefings, late-night drafting sessions with Patel and his team, early morning meetings with airline executives, but they had created something unprecedented. The program we're launching today represents a collaboration between federal agencies, civil rights organizations, and private transportation companies, Vanessa explained. It establishes new standards for employee training, complaint handling, and accountability measures across the industry. She outlined the key components: mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing transportation workers, anonymous reporting systems for both passengers and employees, external audits of complaint patterns, and quarterly public reporting of complaint data. What makes this initiative different is that it's not being imposed through litigation or regulation alone, Vanessa emphasized. It's being embraced voluntarily by companies that recognize the business and ethical imperative of treating all travelers with respect. Porter stepped forward to announce that his airline would be the first to fully implement the program, with a commitment of $20 million toward training and compliance systems. Representatives from 3 other major airlines followed, each pledging their participation. As the press conference continued, Vanessa observed the room full of journalists furiously taking notes. What had begun as a single ugly incident had catalyzed a movement that would potentially affect millions of travelers. The personal humiliation she'd experienced was being transformed into something meaningful, a pattern that had defined much of her career. After the formal announcements, Vanessa found herself surrounded by reporters seeking additional comments. She answered their questions with the same measured composure she'd maintained throughout the ordeal, neither downplaying the seriousness of what had happened nor allowing it to be sensationalized. "Director Washington," called out a voice from the back. "What would you say to Captain Taylor if he were here today?" A hush fell over the crowd. It was the first time anyone had directly mentioned the pilot by name during the press conference. Vanessa considered the question carefully. "I would say that his actions, while harmful, have ultimately led to positive change. Sometimes our worst moments can become catalysts for our greatest progress, both personally and as a society," the reporter pressed further. "Have you had any contact with him since the incident?" "No, and I don't anticipate any," Vanessa replied firmly. "This initiative isn't about one person's actions. It's about addressing patterns that affect countless travelers every day." As the press conference wound down, Zhang approached her. "You handled that brilliantly," he said quietly, "especially the question about Taylor." "Thank you for your partnership in making this happen," Vanessa responded. "Your company's commitment set the tone for the others." Zhang nodded. "After reviewing all 9 complaints against Taylor, we realized this wasn't just about one bad employee. It was about systemic failures in how we hired, trained, and supervised our staff." He hesitated. "The board has approved a full audit of all customer complaints from the past 5 years to identify similar patterns we might have missed." "That's a significant step," Vanessa acknowledged. "A necessary one." Zhang glanced around the room. "By the way, there's someone who wanted to meet you. She flew in specially for the announcement today." He gestured toward a young woman standing near the back of the room, dressed in a crisp navy suit that reminded Vanessa of her own early days at the bureau. "This is Aisha Johnson. She's joining our company as the new Director of Diversity and Inclusion, the position we created as part of our reforms." The young woman stepped forward, extending her hand. "It's an honor to meet you, Director Washington. Your handling of that situation was a masterclass in dignity under pressure." Vanessa shook her hand. "Thank you, Ms. Johnson. You're taking on an important role." "I know," Aisha replied with quiet confidence. "I was a flight attendant for 6 years before getting my master's in organizational psychology. I've seen firsthand how these issues play out on the front lines." "Then you're exactly who they need," Vanessa said, genuinely impressed. "Too often, Companies hired diversity officers with impressive credentials but no real-world understanding of the daily challenges faced by employees and customers. As they spoke, Vanessa noticed Patel motioning to her from across the room. "Excuse me," she said to Aisha and Jung. "Duty calls." Patel was standing with a woman Vanessa recognized as the transportation secretary. Director Washington, the secretary, greeted her. "That was a remarkable presentation. The department is fully committed to supporting this initiative." "Thank you, Madam Secretary. That support will be crucial for widespread adoption. I understand you've been invited to speak at the National Transportation Safety Conference next month?" Vanessa nodded. "I have." "Good. The more visibility this gets, the better." The secretary lowered her voice. "Between us, I've been pushing for something like this for years. Sometimes it takes a high-profile incident to break through the inertia. I'm just glad something positive has come from it," Vanessa replied. After the secretary moved on to speak with other attendees, Patel handed Vanessa a folder. "Hot off the presses, the final training manual. 10 transportation companies have already requested copies." Vanessa flipped through the comprehensive document they'd spent countless hours developing. "You've done outstanding work, Thomas." "We all have," he corrected. "And it's just the beginning. The airline industry may be where this started, but we're already getting inquiries from rail and bus companies." A young aide appeared at Vanessa's side, apologetically interrupting. "Director Washington? Deputy Director Chen is on the phone. He says it's urgent." Excusing herself, Vanessa stepped into a quiet corner to take the call. "Chen, what's happening?" "Just got word of a potential situation in Chicago," he replied, his voice tense. "Nothing confirmed yet, but I wanted to give you a heads up. You might need to cut the press conference short." "Understanding. I'm wrapping up now. I'll be back at headquarters within the hour." Vanessa returned to Patel, explaining that she needed to leave. "Bureau business," she said simply, and he understood immediately. "Of course. I'll handle any follow-up questions from the press." As Vanessa gathered her things, Porter approached for a final word. "Director Washington, I want to thank you personally. You could have destroyed our company with a lawsuit or public campaign. Instead, you pushed us to be better. Mr. Porter, when I took my oath at the FBI, I promised to protect the American people. That means more than just stopping threats. It means working to ensure everyone is treated with the dignity they deserve." She shook his hand firmly. "Keep your commitments, and this program will be worth far more than any lawsuit settlement." Outside, Vanessa's government car was waiting to take her back to FBI headquarters. As they pulled away from the curb, she took one last look at the corporate tower, where a small revolution in transportation policy had just been launched. Her phone buzzed with a message from Deputy Director Chen. "Situation in Chicago contained. Details when you arrive. Baz, saw you on the news. You're becoming a civil rights icon whether you want to be or not." Vanessa smiled slightly at the message. Fame had never been her goal. But if her experience helped create meaningful change, she could accept the spotlight for now. The car wound through downtown traffic toward the FBI building. Vanessa used the time to mentally shift gears from the transportation initiative back to her primary responsibilities. The Bureau had continued its essential work during the 3 weeks she'd divided her attention between her regular duties and the new training program. National security threats didn't pause for civil rights initiatives, no matter how important. When they arrived at headquarters, Vanessa found a small crowd gathered in the lobby. Unusual for the normally all-business environment. As she walked in, they broke into spontaneous applause. Surprised, Vanessa nodded acknowledgement to her colleagues as she made her way to the elevator. Chen was waiting when she stepped out on the executive floor. "What was that about?" she asked, gesturing toward the lobby. "That," Chen replied with a grin, "was about you becoming a hero to half the Bureau. Do you have any idea how many agents have experienced exactly what happened to you?" "Too many," Vanessa said soberly, "and none of them had the platform to do anything about it." Chen fell into step beside her as they walked toward her office. "You're changing things, Vanessa. Not just for travelers, for everyone who's ever been on the receiving end of that kind of treatment." In her office, Vanessa found a stack of messages on her desk. Congratulations from colleagues across government agencies, interview requests from major networks, and an invitation to speak at the FBI Academy's next graduation ceremony. Among them was a handwritten note that caught her eye. It was from FBI Director Phillips himself. Washington, watch the press conference this morning. This is exactly why I put you in charge of special ops. You turn challenges into opportunities and never lose sight of the bigger picture. The Bureau is proud of what you've accomplished. Phillips, Vanessa set the note aside and turned to Chen. Tell me about Chicago. As they dove into the security briefing, Vanessa felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle back onto her shoulders. The transportation initiative would continue without her constant involvement now. The framework was in place, the commitments secured, the momentum established. She had transformed a moment of personal humiliation into a movement for systemic change. Now it was time to return her full attention to protecting the nation. The job she had dedicated her life to. The reason she carried the badge that had changed everything that day at Reagan National. Later that evening, as she worked late in her office reviewing intelligence reports, Vanessa received one final message about the initiative. It was from Aisha Johnson, the airline's new diversity director. The first training session using the new materials was held today with our senior staff. One of the VPs who initially opposed the program came up afterward and said, "I never realized how many people deal with this every day. Small victories, but they add up. Thank you for starting this chain reaction." Vanessa smiled. Small victories indeed. But as she had learned throughout her career, meaningful change rarely happened through dramatic gestures. It happened through persistent effort, through turning painful moments into purposeful action, through refusing to let injustice pass unchallenged. Captain Taylor had burned her ID that day at the airport, never imagining that his act of prejudice would ultimately spark a national movement. He had seen only her skin color and made assumptions. He had never stopped to consider who she might be, not just an FBI director, but someone committed to making the world better, fairer, more just. That was the true power of the badge she carried. Not the authority it granted, but the responsibility it represented to protect, to serve, and when necessary, to change systems that failed to treat all people with dignity. Vanessa turned back to her work, ready for whatever challenge came next.